This presentation is brought to you by Arizona State University's Julianne Wrigley Global Institute of Sustainability and a generous investment by Julianne Wrigley.
If we're interested in undoing the plow, then our efforts need to be intersectional. If we're interested in a different food system, then we need to recognize that you can't undo cheap work and cheap food independently. That struggles for one are struggles for the other. Or thinking about cheap energy and cheap nature, there are ways to reintegrate and retransform and reimagine what an energy economy might look like without treating nature as an infinite resource and trash can. And it's important to recognize also that there are ways of approaching ideas of the lives that are spat out by the modern food system and the money on which it depends in ways that push back. And that means demanding reparations, for example, for things like colonialism, for the genocide that made this country possible, and for the ecological debt that all of us cause to be suffered by the countries in the global south. And again, one can list all of these, but I think I want to just end with a story that is about reimagining what this food system might look like by drawing from First Nation ideas. In this case, in the Pacific boundary of what is currently called the United States and Canada. This is a coastal Salish totem, and in coastal Salish communities there are ways of engaging with food and nature that are very different from the way that we understand it. Where, for example, rather than treating food as a resource, there's a thing called a salmon festival, where that celebrates the treaty between the coastal Salish people and the salmon people. And so when the first salmon swims up the stream, it is caught and celebrated for 10 days. And for 10 days, the entire village recognizes the treaty. And it's only after 10 days that the fish can be pulled from the river. And that means that for 10 days they can make it up and spawn and make sure that there is another generation of fish. And when they are taken not as commodities, not as resources, but as lives that have been taken as part of the treaty and are taken with reverence. And that's a very different way for us to engage with the web of life around us than to understand one another as resources or to understand our food as a commodity. And that points to sort of seismic shift in the way that we understand ourselves and the world around us and the web of life. But I think that's the kind of seismic shift we need as capitalism moves towards a final crisis. We move towards catastrophic climate change and epidemic disease, which ended the system before capitalism and will end this one. We have some choices to make about what it is we imagine afterwards. And there are models to follow and ideas for us to dream together. But that's the whole point, isn't it? None of us can do it alone. We have to do it together, and I've made this whole presentation that was all possible by all of these people, and I want to acknowledge them, but most of all, I want to thank you, and let's get to discussing and imagining what the world might be like. Thanks very much.
This presentation is brought to you by Arizona State University's Julianne Wrigley Global Institute of Sustainability for educational and non-commercial use only.